The conference room smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. I sat there, hands flat on the polished table, watching my boss Gerald shuffle his papers like he was about to change my life forever. 14 years I'd given to Sterling Technologies. 14 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and saving this company millions with my late-night fixes. The promotion to regional director was mine. Everyone knew it. The numbers didn't lie. Gerald cleared his throat, his practiced smile spreading across his face like butter on toast. Today marks a big step forward for our team, he said, eyes sweeping the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. My moment. The reward for all those years of loyalty. I'm proud to announce our new regional director. He paused, and I sat up straighter. Congratulations to Jake. The words hit me like a truck. Jake Patterson. The same Jake who left early every Friday for family emergencies that always ended at Murphy's Bar with Gerald. The same Jake who'd been here 3 years and spent most of them taking credit for my work. The room erupted in polite applause, but all I heard was the sound of my faith in fairness crashing to the floor. Jake grinned like he'd just won the lottery. He stood up, straightening his tie, soaking up congratulations that should have been mine. His eyes found me across the table, and for just a second, I saw something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't surprised. He'd known this was coming. I forced my face into a smile, the kind I'd perfected after years of corporate meetings. Congratulations, Jake, I said, my voice steady as stone. The words tasted like poison, but I swallowed them down. Around me, people clapped and nodded, playing their parts in this theater of lies. Gerald launched into his speech about leadership and vision, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was doing math in my head. 14 years of unpaid overtime. Dozens of projects I'd saved from disaster. The Mitchell account I'd rescued when Jake's presentation fell apart. The system crashed in 2019 when I worked 48 hours straight to keep us online. All of it is meaningless now. Jake caught my eye again and smirked. That smirk told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about merit or hard work or dedication. This was about beer after work and weekend golf games I was never invited to. It was about the old boys club, and I wasn't in it. That night, I sat in my empty apartment with only the city lights for company. My laptop hummed on the kitchen table, cursor blinking on a blank document. 14 years of my life deserved more than anger. They deserved precision. I typed slowly, each word chosen like a surgeon selects instruments. No emotion, no bitterness, just facts laid bare. Dear Gerald, please accept this letter as my formal resignation from Sterling Technologies, effective 2 weeks from today's date. Simple, clean, final. The resignation letter was only 4 sentences long, but each one carried the weight of years. I didn't mention Jake's promotion. I didn't explain my reasons. I didn't need to. Sometimes the most devastating statements are the ones left unsaid. I read it once, twice, then hit send. The email vanished into cyberspace, carrying with it the death of my loyalty to Sterling Technologies. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair. For the first time in 14 years, I felt completely free. The silence in my apartment was different now. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibilities. Full of the future I was about to write for myself. Tomorrow, everything will change. The office felt electric the next morning. Whispers followed me like shadows as I walked to my desk. People clustered around coffee machines and cubicles, their voices dropping when they saw me coming. My resignation had spread faster than wildfire. Olga, wait. Monica from accounting grabbed my arm. Her eyes were wide with panic. You can't leave. This place will fall apart without you. Others nodded in agreement, their faces painted with worry. Before I could answer, Gerald's assistant appeared at my elbow. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly. Gerald wants to see you. Now. She couldn't meet my eyes. Everyone knew what was coming. Gerald's corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. A view he'd never earned but inherited through politics and handshakes. I walked in and closed the door behind me, sealing us in together. He was already red-faced, my resignation letter crumpled in his fist like a weapon. He slammed it down on his desk, so hard his coffee cup jumped. What the hell is this supposed to be? I stayed standing, hands loose at my sides. It's exactly what it looks like, Gerald. His face turned a deeper shade of red. After everything this company has done for you? After I kept you here, promoted you, trusted you? His voice cracked on the last word. Fear. I could smell it on him like cheap cologne. Gerald paced behind his desk like a caged animal. The veins in his neck bulged with each word. You're doing this because of Jake? Because I didn't give you what you wanted? He spat Jake's name like it was ridiculous, but we both knew the truth. This isn't about Jake, I said quietly. This is about respect. That sent him over the edge. He slammed his hand on the desk again, harder this time. Respect? I'll show you respect. You walk out that door, and you'll never work in this industry again. I have connections, Olga. I can make your life very difficult. I remembered something my father told me when I was young. He'd caught me shouting at a neighbor kid until my throat was raw. My father, a man who never raised his voice, pulled me aside and said, Son, men who yell are men who are losing. Standing there watching Gerald unravel, those words came back crystal clear. Gerald wasn't angry about losing me. He was terrified about what my leaving said about him, about his judgment, about his leadership, about the house of cards he'd built with favoritism instead of merit. Are you threatening me, Gerald? I asked, my voice calm as still water. The question hit him like a slap. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. We both knew he'd crossed a line. In today's world, threats like that could end careers. His career. I didn't mean. Gerald started, then stopped. His shoulders sagged as the fight went out of him. Look, Olga, let's be reasonable here. You've earned a lot at this company. How about a raise? 20%. And a new title. Senior Director of Operations. That's what you wanted, right? I studied his face. The desperation was written there in sweat beads and twitching eyes. This wasn't respectful. This was panic. A Band-Aid slapped on a wound that had already gone septic. It's too late for that, I said simply. 30% then. And you can have your own team. Your own budget. Just, please don't do this. Each offer made him smaller in my eyes. He was trying to buy back something that couldn't be purchased. Trust. Respect. Loyalty. They were like broken glass. Once shattered, they cut you every time you tried to pick up the pieces. I shook my head slowly. Just once. The gesture was small, but it hit Gerald like a physical blow. His face went white, then red again. You think you're better than this company? Better than me? You're not. You walk away now, and you'll be nothing. Nothing. The words echoed off the glass walls, desperate and hollow. I turned toward the door. That's when Gerald made his final mistake. You're destroying this company. Gerald's voice boomed across the office as he followed me out. Every head in the building turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the phones seemed to pause their ringing. The entire floor watched as Gerald stood there, chest heaving, face purple with rage. His outburst had torn away the corporate mask he wore so carefully. Now everyone could see what lay underneath. A small, scared man who ruled through fear and favoritism. I stopped and turned slowly to face him. The office held its breath. When I spoke, my voice didn't rise. I didn't need it to. No, Gerald. You did that the day you chose Jake. The silence that followed was deafening. It spread through the office like spilled wine, staining everything it touched. Gerald's mouth moved, but no sound came out. He looked around at all the faces watching him, and I saw the exact moment he realized what he'd done. He'd shown everyone who he really was. In front of his entire staff, he'd proven that loyalty meant nothing, merit meant nothing, and hard work meant nothing. All that mattered was being in his inner circle. I walked back to my desk, packed my things, and left Gerald standing there in the wreckage of his own making. The silence followed me all the way to the elevator. Within hours, the damage was spreading like cracks in a dam. My desk phone had been ringing nonstop before I cleaned it out. Colleagues stopped by to ask if the rumors were true. Junior staff members looking panicked, like someone had just told them Santa wasn't real. By lunch, the whispers had become a roar. Jake tried to assert his new authority, calling a team meeting to address concerns. I watched through the conference room glass as he gestured wildly, trying to rally troops who looked like they were attending a funeral. The younger employees were the worst hit. These were people I'd mentored, guided through their first projects, taught the systems that kept Sterling running. To them, I wasn't just a manager. I was their safety net, the guy who fixed things when they went wrong. What are we supposed to do without you? Casey asked, cornering me by the printer. She was fresh out of college, barely 6 months on the job. I'd held her hand through her first client presentation just last month. You're stronger than you think, I told her. You all are. But her eyes said she didn't believe it. None of them did. They could see the future coming like a train wreck in slow motion, and they were tied to the tracks. By 5 o'clock, I wasn't the only one updating my resume. The next morning brought chaos. 3 junior analysts had called in sick. The Morrison project, our biggest account, was behind schedule with no one qualified to lead it. Jake stood in Gerald's office, gesturing frantically while Gerald rubbed his temples like he had a migraine. Through the glass walls, I could see their lips moving, but I didn't need to hear the words. Jake was drowning, and he knew it. The promotion he'd been so smug about was turning into a life sentence. My replacement hadn't been chosen yet, mainly because everyone Gerald considered was already planning their own exit. The smart ones could read the writing on the wall. If loyalty got you nothing at Sterling Technologies, then Sterling Technologies would get nothing from them. Monica approached my desk again, this time with a different energy. Less panic, more determination. A bunch of us are having drinks after work. You should come. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. It's not about the company, she said quietly. It's about what comes after. That evening, 12 of Sterling's best and brightest sat around a table at Murphy's bar. The same bar where Gerald and Jake had made their deals. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. We can't all leave at once, someone said. Can we? I smiled for the first time in days. Why not? The exodus began like a slow leak that became a flood. First, it was the analysts, then the project managers. By the end of the week, Jake was leading a team that existed mostly on paper. Each resignation letter that hit Gerald's desk was another nail in the coffin. The employees weren't just quitting. They were explaining why. Poor leadership, lack of recognition, favoritism over merit. Each letter was a mirror held up to Gerald's face, showing him exactly what kind of manager he'd become. The clients noticed immediately. Phone calls went unanswered. Reports came in late. The Morrison project ground to a halt when the lead analyst walked out mid-presentation. Jake tried to step in, but his fumbling only made things worse. Where's Olga? Clients started asking. We want Olga to handle this. Gerald had to explain, over and over, that I was no longer with the company. Each explanation chipped away at Sterling's reputation like water wearing down stone. Clients didn't care about internal politics. They cared about results. And without me and my team, results were becoming impossible to deliver. My phone started ringing. Not my work phone, that had been disconnected. My personal phone. Clients called directly, asking if I was available for freelance work. Competitors offering me positions. Former colleagues asked if I was starting my own company. The market was speaking, and it was speaking loud and clear. 2 weeks into the crisis, Gerald called an emergency meeting. The conference room that had once been packed was now half empty. Those who remained looked like survivors of a shipwreck, clinging to whatever debris they could find. We're going through a challenging time, Gerald began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. But we're a strong company. We'll weather this storm. Jake sat beside him, nodding too eagerly, but his eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. The promotion that was supposed to make his career was destroying it instead. What about the Morrison account? Someone asked. It was the question everyone was thinking, but nobody wanted to voice. Gerald's jaw tightened. We're exploring all options. Translation, they were desperate. The Morrison account represented 30% of Sterling's revenue. Losing it would be catastrophic. And everyone in that room knew it was hanging by a thread. After the meeting, I watched through the blinds as Gerald and Jake huddled in the corner office. Their body language told the whole story. Gerald was pointing, his face red with frustration. Jake was shaking his head, hands up in a defensive posture. They were already turning on each other. The alliance that had seemed so solid just weeks ago was cracking under pressure. When there's no one else to blame, partners become enemies. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Morrison Industries, our biggest client, wanted a meeting. Not with Gerald. Not with Jake. With me. Olga, we need to talk, said Frank Morrison, the CEO I'd worked with for 5 years. Can you meet me for lunch? We met at a quiet restaurant downtown, away from prying eyes. Frank got straight to the point. What the hell happened over there? He asked, cutting into his steak. 3 weeks ago, you were handling our account like a Swiss watch. Now we've got some kid who can't tell a quarterly report from a grocery list. I chose my words carefully. There were some changes in management. I decided it was time to move on. Frank nodded slowly. He was a smart man. He could read between the lines. Well, here's the thing. We've been with Sterling for 8 years. But we weren't with Sterling. We were with you. Your analysis, your insights, your problem solving. The company name on the letterhead never mattered to us. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. What would it take to get you handling our account again? On your own terms. The offer hung in the air between us like a bridge to a new future. Frank wasn't just talking about freelance work. He was talking about something bigger, something that could change everything. Give me some time to think about it, I said. But I was already thinking. And what I was thinking was going to terrify Gerald. Word of my lunch with Frank Morrison spread through Sterling's offices like wildfire. By the time I returned from lunch, Gerald was waiting at my old desk, pacing like a caged tiger. We need to talk, he said through gritted teeth. Back in his corner office, Gerald didn't bother sitting down. I know you met with Morrison today. I know what you're doing. What am I doing, Gerald? You're stealing our clients. His voice rose to just below a shout. You're sabotaging this company from the outside. I almost laughed. Gerald still didn't understand. I wasn't stealing anything. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was just existing, and that was enough to threaten his entire empire. Frank Morrison called me, I said calmly. I didn't call him. Don't play games with me, Olga. You know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to destroy everything I've built here. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm just not trying to save it anymore. The distinction was lost on Gerald. He saw conspiracy where there was only consequence. He saw betrayal where there was only the natural result of his own choices. If you take Morrison with you, this company is finished, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you promoted Jake. That evening, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Gerald standing on my porch. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled, and his eyes had the hollow look of a man who hadn't slept in days. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Please, he said before I could speak. I know I made a mistake. I know you deserve that promotion. Help me fix this. It was pathetic. This was the same man who'd threatened to blacklist me in the industry just weeks ago. Now he was standing on my doorstep, begging like a schoolboy who'd gotten caught cheating on a test. It's too late, Gerald. No, it's not. Come back. I'll make Jake a junior director. You can have the regional position. Hell, you can have his office. Just please, don't let this company die. I looked at him for a long moment. His desperation was complete. He was willing to throw Jake under the bus, to admit his mistake publicly, to give me everything I'd originally wanted. But it was all worthless now. You still don't get it, I said quietly. This isn't about titles or offices or money. You had a choice between doing what was right and doing what was easy. You chose easy. Now you get to live with hard. I closed the door and listened to his footsteps retreat down my walkway. Through the window, I watched him sit in his car for 10 minutes before driving away. Even then, I think he was hoping I might change my mind. Jake lasted 2 more weeks. The breaking point came during a presentation to the Hartwell Group, another major client. Jake, trying to salvage what was left of his reputation, promised deliverables the depleted team couldn't possibly provide. When the client asked technical questions, Jake fumbled through answers that made no sense to anyone who understood the industry. The recording of that presentation made its way around the office within hours. Jake's nervous laughter, his desperate attempts to deflect questions, his promise to circle back on every important detail. It was career suicide filmed in real time. By Friday, Jake's resignation letter was on Gerald's desk. No notice period. No transition plan. He just disappeared, leaving behind an empty office and a mountain of problems he couldn't solve. Gerald tried to spin it as pursuing other opportunities, but everyone knew the truth. Jake had been exposed as exactly what he was, an empty suit who'd gotten promoted based on personal relationships rather than professional competence. The irony was beautiful. Gerald had chosen Jake to avoid promoting someone who might threaten his authority. Instead, Jake's failure had threatened the entire company's existence. With Jake gone, Gerald was left holding the bag. All the problems, all the angry clients, all the demoralized employees. The drinking buddy was nowhere to be found when the real work needed to be done. The vultures began circling. Competitors who'd heard about Sterling's troubles started making calls to our clients. They offered better service, more competitive rates, and most importantly, stable leadership. The Morrison account was the first domino to fall. Frank Morrison called Gerald personally to terminate their contract. He was professional but firm. Sterling Technologies was no longer meeting their needs. 3 days later, Hartwell Group followed suit. Then Pacific Dynamics. Then Regional Manufacturing. Each departure took a chunk of Sterling's revenue with it. Gerald tried everything. Panic hiring. Salary increases for remaining staff. Promises of better project management. But you can't rebuild trust with desperate gestures. Trust takes years to build and seconds to destroy. The office that had once buzzed with activity became a ghost town. Empty cubicles, disconnected phones, projects abandoned midstream. The few employees who remained moved like zombies, going through the motions while updating their resumes. I heard about each disaster through my network of former colleagues. Monica called to tell me about the Morrison contract. Casey texted about Hartwell. Even people who'd stayed at Sterling were keeping me informed, like war correspondents sending dispatches from the front lines. My phone kept ringing with new opportunities. Consulting offers, partnership proposals, former Sterling clients asking if I was available to handle their accounts directly. The market had spoken its verdict on Gerald's leadership. The final act began with a conference call. Gerald had arranged an emergency meeting with Sterling's board of directors. Through connections in the company, I learned that several board members had specifically requested that Gerald explain the talent exodus and its impact on client retention. Gerald's presentation was a masterpiece of deflection. He blamed market conditions. He blamed unrealistic client expectations. He blamed employees who lacked loyalty and commitment. What he didn't do was take responsibility for the decisions that had created the crisis. But the board wasn't buying it. They'd done their homework. They'd spoken to departed employees. They'd heard from angry clients. They knew exactly what had happened and who was responsible. "Gerald," said board chair Patricia Williams, "we need to discuss your leadership during this transition." The writing was on the wall. Gerald's empire was crumbling, and even he couldn't deny it anymore. Quarterly revenues were down 40%. Client satisfaction scores were at all-time lows. Employee turnover was approaching 90%. The board gave Gerald an ultimatum: either find a way to stop the bleeding or find himself a new job. They weren't threats. They were facts delivered with corporate precision. Gerald had built his kingdom on sand. Now the tide was coming in, and there was nowhere left to run. 2 days after the board meeting, my phone rang. It was Patricia Williams herself. "Olga, I hope you don't mind me calling you directly. I got your number from Frank Morrison." I minded, but I was curious. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Williams?" I'll cut to the chase. The board has been discussing Sterling's situation, and your name keeps coming up. Multiple clients have mentioned you specifically. Several board members remember your presentations from years past. She paused, letting that sink in. "We'd like to discuss the possibility of you returning to Sterling Technologies in a leadership capacity. Regional director, with full authority to rebuild the team and restore client relationships." It was the offer I'd dreamed about months ago. Everything I'd wanted, everything I'd earned, finally being handed to me on a silver platter. Gerald's job, Gerald's authority, Gerald's corner office with the city view. "That's interesting," I said carefully. "What would happen to Gerald?" "Gerald's employment situation is being reviewed. The board has lost confidence in his ability to lead during challenging times. They were firing him. The man who destroyed my loyalty was about to lose everything." The poetic justice was almost too perfect. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm going to have to decline." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. "May I ask why?" "Because Sterling Technologies isn't worth saving anymore." Instead of returning to Sterling, I did something better. I started my own company. Morrison Industries became my first client, followed quickly by Hartwell Group and Pacific Dynamics. All former Sterling accounts, all eager to work with someone they trusted. Within a month, I had more business than I could handle alone. That's when I started making calls. Monica was my first hire. Then Casey. Then the 3 analysts who'd quit Sterling in the second wave. One by one, I assembled a team of the best talent Sterling had lost. We called ourselves Pinnacle Solutions. Our mission statement was simple: merit-based excellence in everything we do. No politics, no favoritism, no empty promises, just good work rewarded fairly. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Gerald had tried to keep his team together by promoting the wrong person. Instead, he'd scattered his best talent to the wind. Now that talent was reunited under a leader who valued their contributions. Within 3 months, Pinnacle Solutions had 15 employees and a client roster that would have made Sterling envious in its heyday. We were lean, efficient, and hungry. Everything Sterling had once been before Gerald's ego destroyed it. The former Sterling employees who'd joined Pinnacle weren't just happy. They were inspired. They'd seen what happened when loyalty was taken for granted. They understood that their new success was built on merit, not politics. We were building something special, something Gerald had never understood how to create. Gerald's downfall was swift and complete. The board fired him on a Tuesday morning, citing failure to maintain client relationships and employee satisfaction. His severance package was minimal, barely covering 3 months of his expenses. Jake had disappeared entirely, his LinkedIn profile deleted, his phone number disconnected. The golden boy who'd been handed everything had vanished the moment things got difficult. Gerald was left to face the consequences alone. Sterling Technologies lasted 6 more months under interim leadership, but the damage was irreversible. Without clients, without talent, without reputation, the company became just another corporate casualty. The final bankruptcy filing cited inability to compete in changing market conditions. 23 years of business, destroyed by one man's inability to recognize talent and treat people fairly. Gerald tried reaching out to me one last time, through LinkedIn. His message was short. "I should have promoted you. I'm sorry." I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Some apologies come too late to matter. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Through mutual connections, I heard he'd taken a mid-level position at a smaller firm. No corner office, no staff to manage, no authority to abuse. Just a desk and assignments from people who knew nothing about his past except what they'd read in industry publications. The man who'd once held my future in his hands was now just another middle manager, starting over at 55. 1 year after leaving Sterling, I received an invitation that made me smile. The Regional Business Excellence Awards ceremony. Pinnacle Solutions had been nominated in 3 categories: Fastest Growing Company, Client Satisfaction Excellence, and Innovative Leadership. I decided to attend. The ceremony was held at the Grand Hotel downtown, the same venue where Sterling had hosted its annual client appreciation dinners. The ballroom was packed with industry leaders, successful entrepreneurs, and rising stars. Halfway through the evening, I spotted a familiar face at the bar. Gerald, wearing a slightly wrinkled suit that had seen better days, nursing a whiskey and staring at nothing in particular. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Gerald raised his glass in a small salute. Not celebration, but acknowledgement. A recognition of how far we'd both traveled from that conference room where it all began. I nodded back. There was no satisfaction in his downfall anymore. No anger. No need for revenge. Just the quiet understanding that choices have consequences, and everyone lives with the results of their decisions. When Pinnacle Solutions was announced as the winner of Innovative Leadership, I walked to the stage and accepted the award. From the podium, I could see Gerald still at the bar, watching with something that might have been pride or regret. In my acceptance speech, I didn't mention Sterling Technologies. I didn't mention Gerald. I talked about merit, about trust, and about building teams where everyone's contributions matter. The applause was genuine and warm. 2 years after starting Pinnacle Solutions, we moved into our own building. Not a corner office in someone else's company, but an entire floor that belonged to us. Glass walls, modern furniture, and a view that stretched to the horizon. My office had the same city view that Gerald's used to have, but it felt completely different. This wasn't inherited authority or borrowed power. This was earned. Monica knocked on my door one afternoon, holding a newspaper clipping. "You might find this interesting," she said with a grin. The article was about Sterling Technologies' assets being sold at auction. Office furniture, computer equipment, even the conference table where Gerald had announced Jake's promotion. Everything was being liquidated to pay creditors. "Should we bid on anything?" Monica asked jokingly. "No," I said. "We don't need their leftovers." That evening, I drove past the building that had once housed Sterling Technologies. The windows were dark, the parking lot empty except for a few weeds growing through cracks in the asphalt. A "For Lease" sign swayed gently in the wind. 14 years of my life had been spent in that building. 14 years of believing that hard work and loyalty would be rewarded. It had taken Gerald's betrayal to teach me that sometimes the greatest gift is discovering who you really are when everything familiar gets stripped away. I didn't feel sad looking at the empty building. I felt grateful. Gerald's decision to promote Jake had been the catalyst for everything good that followed. Without that betrayal, I might still be sitting in a cubicle, waiting for someone else to recognize my worth. 3 years later, Pinnacle Solutions had grown to 50 employees across 2 cities. We'd become the success story I'd once imagined Sterling could be under better leadership. Our client retention rate was 97%. Employee satisfaction scores were through the roof. We were profitable, growing, and built to last. The former Sterling employees who joined us had flourished. Monica was now a vice president. Casey led our fastest-growing division. The analysts who'd followed me had become senior managers, mentoring new hires the same way I'd once mentored them. We'd created something special. A company where talent was recognized, where hard work was rewarded, and where loyalty flowed both ways between management and staff. One afternoon, my assistant buzzed me. "There's someone here to see you." Says his name is Gerald Foster. I considered refusing the meeting, but curiosity won out. "Send him in." Gerald looked older than his years. His hair had gone completely gray, and his suit, while clean, had the worn look of someone watching every dollar. He sat across from my desk with the careful posture of a man who knew he was in foreign territory. "Nice place," he said, looking around my office. "Thank you. What can I do for you, Gerald?" He cleared his throat nervously. "I wanted to congratulate you on your success, and to apologize for how things ended at Sterling." I waited, saying nothing. "I made a mistake," he continued. "I let personal relationships cloud my judgment. You deserved that promotion, and I was too proud to admit it." Gerald shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable but determined to continue. "I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, about the choices I made. I destroyed a good company because I couldn't separate friendship from business." He paused, staring at his hands. "Jake and I aren't even friends anymore, you know? Haven't spoken in over a year. Turns out loyalty based on shared drinks doesn't survive much pressure." I found myself feeling sorry for him, which surprised me. The anger I'd carried had long since faded, replaced by something closer to pity. Gerald had lost everything: his job, his company, his reputation, even the friendship he'd valued over merit. "What are you doing now?" I asked. "Operations manager at a small consulting firm." "It's fine. Honest work. I don't make the big decisions anymore, which is probably for the best." He looked up at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen in Gerald's eyes before: humility. "I'm not here to ask for a job," he said quickly. "I know that bridge was burned a long time ago. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About leadership, about treating people fairly, about merit matters more than relationships." "I appreciate you saying that," I said. Gerald stood to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've built here. Sterling could have been this, if I'd been smart enough to let it happen." After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and consequences and the strange paths that lead us to where we're supposed to be. 5 years after that day in the Sterling conference room, I sat in my own conference room, preparing to announce a promotion. The candidate was Casey, the nervous college graduate I'd once mentored. She'd grown into one of the most capable managers I'd ever worked with. The room was full of people who believed in merit-based leadership because they'd lived it. People who knew that hard work would be recognized, that loyalty would be returned, and that talent would always find its way to the top. "I'm proud to announce our new regional director," I said, looking around the table. "Congratulations to Casey." The applause was genuine, enthusiastic, and well-deserved. Casey's eyes were bright with pride and determination. She'd earned this moment through years of dedication, innovation, and leadership. After the meeting, I walked back to my office and sat down at my desk. The city stretched out below me, full of possibilities and challenges and opportunities for those brave enough to seize them. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank Morrison. Saw the announcement about Casey's promotion. "Well deserved. You've built something special over there." I smiled and set the phone aside. Outside my window, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. The silence in my office wasn't empty anymore. It wasn't filled with betrayal or broken promises. It was filled with satisfaction. The quiet satisfaction of a job well done, a team well led, and a future well earned. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well. Sometimes the best response to betrayal is building something so much better that the betrayal becomes irrelevant. I'd learned that silence could be more powerful than shouting, and that walking away could be more devastating than fighting back. Gerald had taught me that lesson, though he'd never intended to. And for that, in a way, I was grateful.